Hey you all, I'm Rebecca and I'm 65 years old. I never thought that I could divorce my husband Tyler. We had been together for so long, and despite the love we had for each other, it fizzled out. I still couldn't imagine life without him. But when I turned 35, I found the strength to file for divorce. Things were going to get nasty between us, but then something awful happened. Tyler got into a car accident while he was on his way to fix things between us. The accident rendered him paralyzed from the waist down, and he needed help with everything, and I mean everything. I felt terrible for him and decided to stay with him, even though it was against my better judgment. After all, I was technically responsible for it. Slowly but surely, after deciding to work things out with him, I was just becoming a live-in nanny for him and not his actual wife. He was going through a lot, and I could understand that. But he had just become so rude and bitter after the accident. There were many occasions when we would fight, and Tyler would say that he felt resentful towards me because of what I put him through, blaming me for everything. I would suggest separating again, but Tyler would call me selfish for proposing something like that because he had no one to take care of him. This led us to stay in this constant cycle of abuse and verbal altercations, and I was tired of him. I couldn't take it anymore. Becoming the breadwinner was never something I had planned for myself, but it happened by proxy of my husband Tyler losing his job due to his accident. Since he couldn't work at a regular job or perform any tasks that require technology, the burden fell on me to keep us afloat. Tyler struggled with the loss of his job and the sense of usefulness that had consumed him. He would often fall into depressive episodes, refusing to eat or take care of himself. His misery was palpable, and it was painful to watch. One day, I had a bright idea to involve him in my work. I asked him if he would be interested in helping me draft proposals, read articles, and work on assignments. I thought this would give him something productive to do and perhaps even help us bond and rekindle the spark we had lost. The arrangement seemed to work initially. Tyler's involvement in my work gave him a sense of purpose and filled some of the void left by his inability to hold a traditional job. It was also a way for us to spend more time together. However, over time, Tyler's attitude began to change. He became increasingly bossy, constantly telling me how to do my job, what I should write, and how to structure my proposals. He started acting like he was an expert in my field and that he knew better than I did. It rubbed me the wrong way, and I couldn't help but resent the unsolicited advice and his snobbish behavior. I had invited him into my professional world as a way to bridge the emotional gap between us, but it seemed to have backfired. The more involved he became, the more our relationship suffered. Our attempts to connect and rekindle what we had lost only seemed to push us further apart. I was beginning to question if there was any way to salvage the love and companionship we had once shared. It was another typical evening with Tyler. As I was hunched over my desk, typing away, he couldn't resist the urge to nag and preach about how I should be doing my work. "Rebecca, I think you should consider restructuring the proposal like this," he said, pointing to my screen. "It'll make it more impactful, you know." I sighed, trying to keep my irritation in check. "Tyler, I appreciate your advice, but I've been doing this job for years. I know what I'm doing." He slumped in his wheelchair, a hint of sadness clouding his face. "I just want to feel useful, Rebecca. It's been so long since I felt like I contributed to anything. I miss that." I felt a pang of guilt as I watched his tears well up. It had been a while since he'd expressed such vulnerability. I knew how hard his life had become since the accident. But this was the first time he had admitted how useless he felt. I understand, Tyler, I really do. If giving me advice on my work makes you feel more impatient, then I'll accept it, even if it's unsolicited. A relieved smile touched his lips. Thank you, Rebecca. It means a lot to me. I don't want you to think I'm just being bossy or critical. I nodded, softening my tone. I know you're just trying to help. From that point on, I let Tyler take on the role of my unofficial work consultant. He'd give me advice, suggest revisions, and share his thoughts on various projects. It wasn't always easy, as his recommendations sometimes felt overbearing, but I knew it was essential for his self-esteem. Over time, Tyler seemed to gain some sense of purpose and fulfillment. He no longer broke down in despair as much, and our arguments became less frequent. We had both made sacrifices for our relationship, and if this was what it took to help him find a sense of worth, then I was willing to endure his nagging and unsolicited advice. But obviously, this was taking a toll on me, and it turns out you can't keep piling on emotional labor on someone. One day, their back will break. Tyler's newfound involvement in my work started as a well-intentioned effort to boost his self-esteem, but it quickly evolved into an overwhelming and contentious part of our relationship. Even after that initial discussion, I had to constantly bite my tongue, as Tyler became increasingly critical and demanding. You're late to work again, Rebecca, he chastised me one morning. You can't afford to be lazy, you know. You have a job to do. I gritted my teeth, trying to maintain my composure. His comments always stung, and I felt like he was doing it on purpose, but I had grown accustomed to these outbursts. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a peaceful morning without his relentless reminders. The fights between us had become more frequent. I tried to avoid confrontation, but Tyler was volatile, and it was impossible to predict what might set him off. Walking on eggshells had become a daily routine, and it was exhausting. Sometimes I found myself reporting to lies just to escape the relentless pressure. I'd tell Tyler I had to go on a work trip, when in reality, I just needed a break from his constant presence and unsolicited advice. It was my way of seeking respite and reminding myself of the life I used to have, free from this oppressive dynamic. Whenever I mustered the courage to ask Tyler to reduce his involvement in my work life, it would inevitably lead to another breakdown. He called himself useless and utter self-deprecating comments that were painful to hear. At first, I would worry, rushing to console him, but over time, I became desensitized to his words as he repeated them like a broken record. I had shouldered most of the emotional labor in our relationship, and it was becoming a heavy burden to bear. As I watched happy couples on the street reminiscing about my younger, carefree days, I couldn't help but feel a growing resentment towards my husband. It wasn't his paralysis that fueled my resentment. It was the emotional turmoil and constant scrutiny that had taken over our lives. The love we once shared had dissipated, replaced by a sense of frustration. I was suffocating in my own life, trapped in a never-ending cycle of emotional turmoil. The woman I once was had vanished, replaced by the weary caretaker of an ailing and bitter husband. It was a life I could have never anticipated or desired. As I reached my 60s, I'd stopped complaining altogether. There was a sense of resignation that had settled within me. When Tyler would argue or berate me, I would nod or admit he was right, hoping to avoid confrontations and maintain a semblance of peace. Tyler, however, latched onto my compliance, using it as a tool to assert his dominance further. He'd become even more demanding, insisting that I work harder and make more money. I was no longer a spring chicken, and there were days when I would fall ill, hoping for some understanding and compassion, but Tyler showed neither. He expected me to cater to him while simultaneously generating income. Hopelessness engulfed me, and I spiraled into a deep depression. There were days when I didn't have the strength to get out of bed, unable to bear the weight of my life. During one of these spells, I holed up in my room for 2 days, despite Tyler banging on the door. In a moment of panic, convinced I had passed away, Tyler called 911. The police forcibly entered the room and found me alive, but looking as if I was slowly wasting away due to my overwhelming misery. Admitted to a psychiatric ward, I spent days receiving counseling and therapy, which offered a brief respite from the relentless pressure at home. I wished that those days could have stretched on forever, away from Tyler's constant bitterness and complaints. Upon my return, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia for those few days of peace. Tyler had resumed his usual routine, and I was left wondering if there would ever be an escape from the bleak reality of our lives. 5 more years had passed, and now I had reached the age of 65. Retirement was finally within my grasp, a time to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and at last find some relaxation in my life. I mustered the courage to mention my retirement plans to Tyler, hoping he would understand the need for this transition. However, his reaction was far from what I expected. He erupted, his voice thundering with anger as he accused me of being selfish. Confused and taken aback, I asked him why he was so livid. He didn't mince words, berating me for considering retirement. According to him, he needed me to continue working to cover his mounting medical bills and household expenses. Tyler argued that there was no way we could sustain ourselves on my pension alone, and he demanded that I remain employed. In his eyes, I was the sole financial lifeline, and he clung to the belief that my continued labor was necessary for our survival. Part of me wanted to reveal a hidden fact I kept for years, that I had a robust Roth IRA and a substantial pension fund. I had invested diligently from the age of 35, right around the time we had contemplated divorce, which is why he didn't know about it. But the chaotic path our life took after we reconciled had pushed that information aside because we had bigger fish to fry, obviously, and I hadn't seen the need to share it with Tyler. Now, as he berated me for my alleged selfishness, the opportunity to divulge the truth presented itself. However, something about his selfishness, his anger, and his ungrateful attitude held me back. It seemed that my sacrifices, care, and support for him over the years had gone unnoticed, unacknowledged, and unappreciated. The idea of providing more financial security when I had already given so much was a breaking point. I exploded, releasing years of pent-up frustration. The emotions I had kept suppressed for so long burst forth, and I confronted him. I labeled him as selfish and ungrateful, reminding him of the sacrifices I had made throughout our tumultuous journey. Tyler, you ungrateful pig. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for you. I've wasted the last 30 years dealing with your BS. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me, with insults and accusations? How dare you? You're nothing without me, you realize that. You'd be rotting in your own misery if it weren't for my care and support. I've bent over backwards to cater to your every need, and this is how you treat me. You think you can just demand and expect me to be at your beck and call? Well, you've got another thing coming. You better start showing some respect, or maybe I should just leave you to rot all on your own. You can see how well you fare without the lazy and selfish wife you seem to think I am. The weight of my words hung in the air, echoing in the room. It was a moment of reckoning, and I had finally found my voice, asserting my worth and demanding the respect I had long deserved. You'd think that after an ear beating like that, he would finally shut up and stop his crap. But boy, oh boy, was I wrong. Tyler's voice was charged with frustration as he retaliated. Oh, so you want me to rot? Well, that's rich coming from the woman who thinks her retirement should mean I suffer. He couldn't contain the hurt and anger anymore, letting his words flow freely. "You've done nothing but hold me back and make me feel miserable. I wish I had a wife who hadn't let herself go, who had enough money to take us on vacations and make our lives better. Everything is your fault. I wouldn't be in this damn wheelchair if you hadn't tried to end things with me so prematurely, trying to throw away our marriage like it was nothing. But now I'm suspecting that you might have been right." I couldn't believe the audacity of Tyler. After our heated argument, he had the nerve to wake me up in the morning by splashing water on my face. I was furious, my emotions still raw from the fight the night before. I yelled at him, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Tyler, with a smug expression, told me that I needed to get up and head to work. He insisted that I had to inform my company that I wasn't retiring yet, and that I would work for a few more years. I was baffled and disheartened because I had already put in my notice, and he knew that. His next words left me in shock. He threatened to kick me out of our home if I didn't comply. I never imagined that he would resort to such an extreme measure just because I wanted to retire and enjoy the later years of my life. Instead of arguing with him or begging for his forgiveness, I decided to take him seriously. I began to calmly pack up my belongings, believing that it was time to finally put an end to our tumultuous relationship. Tyler had pushed me beyond my limits, and I couldn't take it anymore. As I methodically packed my things, Tyler started to realize the severity of the situation. He desperately pleaded with me, apologizing, telling me how much he needed me, but it was too late. I had given him years of my life, and he had drained me emotionally and mentally. There was nothing left for me to offer. I knew it was time to leave him behind and seek happiness and peace on my own. Tyler had chosen his path, and I was choosing mine. As I packed my things, my heart ached, and I felt a growing sense of sadness for the life we had once shared. Tyler, who had previously seemed so determined to push me away, was now crumbling before my eyes. "Rebecca, please listen to me. I'm so sorry for everything I said. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to get a reaction out of you. But I don't want you to leave. I need you in my life. I've been so foolish and selfish. I didn't realize how much you mean to me." Tears welled up in his eyes, and he reached out to hold my arm, as if afraid that I would disappear forever. His voice had lost its edge, replaced by genuine remorse and vulnerability. "I didn't want to kick you out. I was just angry and hurt. I didn't want you to retire because I just feel like everything is going out of control, and for a long time, this has been the only thing I could control. I've been taking out my frustration on you, and it's not fair. Please, Rebecca, don't go. We can work this out. I promise I'll change. I'll be better. Just don't leave me." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and it tugged at my heartstrings, but I had reached my breaking point after years of being the one who held our relationship together. I knew it was time for me to put myself first, even if it meant leaving Tyler behind. After a month of solitude in that charming little apartment, I finally decided it was time to reveal the truth to Tyler. I had been ignoring his calls. My silence was a testament to how tired I was of his constant nagging and guilt-tripping. Every call he made sounded desperate, but I remained resolute. For years, I played the role of an obedient wife and caregiver, sacrificing my happiness. No more. It was time for him to understand the consequences of his actions, and my choice to put myself first. The moment his call came through again, I took a deep breath and answered. Tyler's voice was a mix of despair and frustration as he said, "Rebecca, please, can we talk? I miss you. I can't do this without you." It was time to clear the air, to reveal the secret that I'd kept from him all these years. I took a deep breath and continued. "Tyler, listen to me. I've kept something from you, and it's time for you to know. Me retiring wasn't going to leave us struggling. I have a substantial Roth IRA, and we would have been just fine. I kept it from you because I was tired of being mistreated and treated like a doormat. I was going to tell you the day you lashed out on me, but I decided not to because I was sick of your crap." The line went silent, save for Tyler's muffled sobs on the other end. His apologies were tinged with genuine remorse, and he admitted, "If I had known about the Roth IRA, I would never have spoken to you like that. I'm so sorry, Rebecca." But that was precisely the issue I couldn't ignore. I replied firmly, "That's the problem, Tyler. You had no right to treat me that way, whether or not you knew about it. I'm not coming back. I want to live the rest of my days without the constant worry and feeling like I'm being taken for granted." Tyler pleaded, begged, and tried to convince me to return. He even promised he'd change, but I knew that change was rarely that simple. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my own decisions, and I embraced a newfound sense of freedom. Staying alone in the cozy apartment had given me a taste of a life I'd almost forgotten. The life I had sacrificed for a husband who had grown entitled and bitter over the years. It was a life where I could set my own course, answer to no one, and prioritize my happiness. As the days passed, my resolve to stand my ground remained unshaken. I wasn't going to let guilt or fear force me back into a situation I had endured for far too long. The realization that I deserved happiness and peace was my guiding light, and it would lead me to a life that didn't revolve around someone else's needs. Over the next few months, I began to rebuild my life. It was challenging, but the freedom I gained was worth every ounce of effort. I rekindled old friendships and discovered new hobbies. It was as though life had handed me a fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it. Meanwhile, Tyler faced the consequences of his actions. The tables had turned, and the roles had reversed. He struggled with daily life, grappling with the difficulties of caring for himself in his condition. In the absence of the partner he had mistreated for so long, he was forced to confront the harsh reality of life without my support. But I couldn't help him anymore. My priority was me, and the years I had spent putting his needs ahead of my own were over. I felt no bitterness, only the sweet taste of independence. In my new life, I found the happiness and peace I had been yearning for. The burden that had weighed me down for so long had been lifted, and I reveled in the freedom to live life on my own terms. As time passed, I came to realize that it wasn't too late to start anew, to rediscover the passions and dreams I had once set aside. The world was wide open with opportunities, and I had the agency to seize them despite my old age.